It's not my goal to be partisan ever. When we first started this church just 3 months before the history-making 2008 election, we actually had several leaders of the Greene County Democratic Party who were active members of our church. I celebrated the election of our nation's first black president with as much enthusiasm as anyone else who was at that watch party. And at the time, I was really a huge fan of our Democratic Senator, Claire McCaskill. She's helped me to take the edge off of that at times, but still, considering the alternative, still a big fan. Prior to that time, I had been regularly contacted by officials in the Democratic Party trying to recruit me to run for various elected offices. But because for a generation I'd been writing opinion columns for the Springfield News Leader that took our elected officials to task for illegal wars, cuts to education and poverty programs, environmental degradation, and for misogynistic and homophobic policies, I knew that I had no chance of ever being elected to anything. I simply have too many opinions that are out there on the net. However, when we had prominent Democrats in the White House, the Senate, and I was critical of them for those illegal wars, for undermining education, poverty programs, failing to properly defend the environment, and for tacitly supporting misogynistic and homophobic policies, I stopped hearing from local and state Democratic Party officials. Many of those, possibly a socialist, Many of those Democratic loyalist members of the church left so angry that I can sometimes now clear out a coffee shop by just walking in the door. People will just fold up and ask for a to-go cup and head out of the room. That is possibly even more true today than ever before. As you know, I tried to be a helpful part of the small committee planning our city's protest of Donald Trump's visit to the Queen City of the Ozarks. I really am always eager to network with other progressives, especially the sorts of progressives that are willing to carry signs on sidewalks. Those are my peeps. That's who I want to get to know. That's who I want to befriend. We did a lot of things well in this week's protest, but there were some things that I regard to be glaring mistakes in both decision and planning. So I wrote an article in which I tried to discuss what I regarded to be some of the important points where we could learn from that experience and do better. I even used a good deal of self-deprecating humor, which I never feel obligated to do since so many people are willing to deprecate me on their own that I never feel like I need to help them. But I thought I would grease the skids a little bit with that. But the reaction has been, to use a word that we're not supposed to use anymore, insane. Now, I don't get to use my philosophy degree very often, but I'd like to take just a moment to give you a quick lesson in Aristotelian logic. There is a fallacy called ad hominem. It means literally against the man or of the person. We say that an argument is an ad hominem fallacy when, in response to a stated position, rather than addressing the issue, the respondent attacks the character of the person who brings the message. In common parlance, we say, don't shoot the messenger. But if you say ad hominem fallacy, it sounds like you know a little Latin, and that's always better. Social media, however, seems to encourage, even to reward ad hominem, bringing out the monsters that hide even within academics and community leaders. I dare say that almost nothing of my helpful and reasonable points about how we might have done a better job in this protest were heard, but there has been a riot of what I like to call liberal cannibalism, in which people we might otherwise think of as a progressive ally have been busy chewing the flesh, specifically off of my bones, but others as well. I couldn't care less about being the victim of internet gossip. That's nothing new to me. What I'm really worried about is progressives' ability to think, to network, to build community, so that they can be successful. What scares me is that progressive political movements and progressive churches are failing all over the world. And no matter who you want to blame for Donald Trump's election, ultimately it comes down to progressives lost an election that should have been a walk in the park, largely because we don't appear to be able to work respectfully with each other. Missouri's favorite son, President Harry Truman, was often called "Give 'em Hell Harry." But Truman objected, saying, "I never really gave them hell. I just told them the truth, and they thought it was hell." Then as now, Truman's message was often lost in the absurd attacks he suffered of his character, of his family, of his profession as a haberdasher. I think he was truly a political genius in lots of ways. Not that he didn't make some glaring mistakes. He did. But he was brilliant in many of the things that he did, but was derided out of ad hominem attacks. But what I find the most interesting and simultaneously the most disappointing is how the issues that Harry Truman was so adamant about 70 years ago when he was running for re-election, that those same issues are so current today as to make one likely to despair about our society's ability to make progress. That's not to say we haven't made a lot of progress in 70 years. We have. But just listen to what he said in this campaign speech. Now, this is a longer quote than I'll typically use in the pulpit, and where he's specifically aiming at Republicans. I got to tell you, you could say almost the same thing about most corporate Democrats. It's the differences between the parties has gotten to be too subtle to my liking. Which some people would call me a socialist, but others, I still say I represent the Democratic wing of the Democratic Party, but that just doesn't have a lot of legs. But what he said 70 years ago, well, I've been studying the Republican Party, let's say now for 12 years at close hand in the capital of the United States, and by this time, I have discovered where the Republicans stand on most major issues. Since they won't tell you themselves, I'm going to tell you. They approve of the American farmer, but they are willing to help him go broke. They stand foursquare for the American home, but not for housing. They are strong for labor, but they are stronger for restricting laborers' rights. They favor a minimum wage, and the smaller the minimum, the better. They endorse educational opportunity for all, but they won't spend money for teachers or schools. They think modern Medicare and hospitals are fine for people who can afford them. They approve of Social Security benefits so much that they took them away from almost 1 million people. They believe in international trade so much that they crippled our reciprocal trade program and killed our international wheat agreement. They favor the admission of displaced persons, but only within shameful racial and religious limitations. They consider electric power a great blessing, but only when the private power companies get their rake off. They say TVA is wonderful and we ought to never try it again. They condemn cruelly high prices, but fight to the death every effort to bring them down. They think the American standard of living is a fine thing as long as it doesn't spread to all the people. And they admire the government of the United States so much that they would like to buy it. If the President of the United States could state the hypocritical nature of the economic divide so clearly, and he could state it in a democracy where the masses who are the victims of this economic disparity and inequality can all vote, how is it that nothing seems to change on that front? John Maynard Keynes succinctly describes the problem in this way. He said, "Capitalism is the astounding belief that the most wicked of men will do the most wickedest of things for the greatest good of everyone." Capitalism did not invent the 3-day weekend that you're enjoying. I'm at work. I don't know about you all, but capitalism did not invent the 3-day weekend. Capitalism did not invent the 40-hour work week. Capitalism didn't invent paid vacations, paid sick leave, or retirement programs. That, ladies and gentlemen, was organized labor.
Amen.
Is it because I'm up here that I feel so lonely? It is difficult to motivate productive work, innovation, invention, or denial of any immediate personal fulfillment in the absence of a promise of some personal reward. Capitalism can hold out the promise that if you work hard, if you delay gratification, if you save, that you will reap a wonderful reward of economic security, if not wealth. I mean, it's very difficult to imagine that you can work your way into being rich, but you can be secure. Or that you can work your way into comfort, if not luxury. The problem is that when the American dream becomes an American wishful thinking, when hard work, delaying gratification, and saving still doesn't allow you to retire with dignity, or to have access to health care, or to ever own a home, then the promise of capitalism has become a lie. It's where Amy Klein, and for those of you that listen to us on the internet, you don't hear the wisdom lesson, but we've been studying Amy Klein's No Is Not Enough. And it's one of the few books that I would tell you to stop what you're doing and go read it now, though several of us would say that you have to plow through 9 chapters of extremely depressing material to get to some suggestions about what we can do in the future. But with the right rules in place, capitalism and its rewards can inspire invention, innovation. You look at American history and of what is modern life? What would modern life be without cell phones and computers, without telephones, without televisions, without radio, without cars, without powerful trains, without the space program, without modern aviation? Almost all of which came from the United States of America at a time when capitalism inspired invention and innovation. But if you take away the reward, where's the next series of inventions going to come from? What are you going to do when people are not able to get an engineering degree or get a degree in science or math because they're too busy doing menial jobs, multiple menial jobs, in order to feed their family? But when we vilify teachers and the police and auto workers, all labor unions, for insisting on a living wage and a pension that lets a person be able to eventually buy a pair of Bermuda shorts and black knee socks and move to a retirement community in Florida and criticize the government full time, if you don't get a chance to do that, then what does capitalism have to offer us? It has become a lie. It's become a curse. The late Jewish Croatian economist Branko Horvat said, you all know Branko. No. This is important. It is now well known that capitalist development leads to the concentration of capital, employment, and power. It is somewhat less known that it leads to the almost complete destruction of economic freedom. Amen. That is, if you just turn it loose, and there is a way to be an intelligent capitalist, but if you just turn it loose unregulated, all the wealth goes to a tiny fraction of the civilization, and civilization itself virtually ceases to exist. Now, everyone that ever played that old board game, Monopoly, has a basic understanding of unbridled capitalism. If you keep rolling the dice and moving your pieces in that circle of life of capitalism, eventually one person ends up with all the real estate and all of the money. That is unbridled capitalism. Now, if you change the rules so that all of the players have a chance to get back into the game, rules that keep one player from quickly acquiring all the land, utilities, and infrastructure, then you get an intelligent capitalism. In truth, our nation has been up and down that roller coaster a few times. We've been at this for 240 years, and we've come right up to the brink of disaster with all the wealth in the hands of a few and poverty for the majority, and you come right up against a revolution. And there's nothing more true, I think, than President Kennedy's statement that those who prevent peaceful revolution make violent revolutionary inevitable. That either we will recognize that the income disparity that is destroying our country has to be corrected, or we will end up in a violent revolution. And you just take a look at the divided circumstances in the Middle East, and you see these pockets of influence that are dividing up Syria and Iraq and Iran, and you think that could be America. That could be America if we don't succeed in recognizing that everyone of every race, of every ethnicity, of every religion has a right to a decent life. We can divide our nation into a literal civil war circumstance that would make the Civil War of the 19th century look mild by comparison. In our earliest days, Thomas Jefferson, who was one of the primary architects of the nation, said, "I hope that we will crush in its birth the aristocracy of our moneyed corporations, which dare already to challenge our government to a trial of strength and bid defiance to the laws of our country." In the late 1700s, corporations were already trying to buy our government and have been increasingly successful for 200 years. The most wicked of all men will not of their own accord do what is right for the poor. The most wicked of capitalists will never make sure that their workers are well compensated and have a comfortable retirement. It's not natural market forces that brought slavery to an end. It was not the invisible hand of the market that ended child labor. It was not competition of the marketplace that made workplaces more safe, that gave us the modern invention of the weekend or the 40-hour work week or paid vacations and sick leave. It was organized labor working in conjunction with then spiritual leaders. I don't see the church doing much corporately anymore, but there was a time when the church and labor unions worked together to bring a new vision of a standard of living to politicians. When things go a little bit too well for too long, and I think during the 80s and 90s that may have happened, labor unions get weak, and churches become irrelevant, and politicians are sold to the highest bidder. Franklin Roosevelt, who had to rally America to respond to fascism, Nazism, communism, and nationalism, also found the time and energy to warn the Congress of the United States that their constant caving in to corporate power threatened to bring America as a free nation to an end. He said on April 29th, 1938, "The liberty of a democracy is not safe if the people tolerate the growth of private power to a point where it becomes stronger than their democratic state itself. That, in essence, is fascism. Ownership of government by an individual, by a group, or by any other controlling private power. That's fascism. And the only way that we can stop the tilt towards fascism is exactly what Naomi Klein was saying, was a massive redistribution of wealth, and that scares people to death. But we cannot let wealth accumulate in the hands of the few to the impoverishing of the rest of the nation. It's not as easy to see as it was in the days of Jefferson or even of Roosevelt and Truman, but there's a continual erosion of democracy in our country and a certain evolution toward corporate control of our government and its agencies. Weakening organized labor has been crucial to this slow death of democracy and the rise of what I used to call oligarchy, but now I think is more accurately called fascism. While I decry the partisan divide as much as anyone, I maintain that the solution to this debilitating divide is not to give in. Peace in the absence of justice is just surrender. If I was going to spend money on a bunch of new t-shirts, it would say that exactly. Peace in the absence of justice is surrender. We don't need to surrender. We need to get better at building coalitions among progressives. We need to get better at telling our story. We need to educate. We need to fill the media and the internet with logical, informed, and progressive views. This is no time to give up. To give our native son voice one more time this morning, Truman said, given a choice between a Republican and someone who acts like a Republican, people will vote for a real Republican all the time. Success for progressives is not by acting like you're a conservative. And unfortunately, a lot of Democrats that I've seen lately have been running on what is essentially a moderate Republican platform, and they demand our support. Well, I'm not ready to surrender. Are you? Are you all ready to surrender? It's not up to us to abandon our values and to do our best impersonation of a moderate in order to make other people feel more comfortable. We are the prophets now. We are Isaiah, Moses, Jeremiah, and Amos. We are the ones who will demand that workers will be given a living wage. We are the ones that will insist that laborers who build houses get to own one. We are the ones that will defend the immigrant farmer, the child growing up in urban blight and underfunded schools. We're the ones who will prevent our economically disadvantaged young men and women from being recruited to go and die for a war, for oil, or for military spending. Amen. How can we defend justice against the combined power of corporations and government? Well, folks, I got to tell you, the way you defend justice is the same way you defend a lion. You set it free. You keep talking about it. You keep teaching it. You keep holding it up as an example. You keep shouting amen until you're hoarse. It's not teacher and police pensions that are threatening this nation's economy. There are no teachers I know of who have offshore accounts and apartments in Paris. Business owners may cry out against the minimum wage being raised so that something slightly better than slavery might exist in our entry-level jobs. But you know, folks, if everyone in the United States had an Ivy League college degree, or if everybody got a PhD, someone would still have to nail shingles to roofs. Someone would still have to make pizzas. Someone would still have to milk cows. At some point, we have to acknowledge that the people who make life possible are people who deserve to have their lives made possible. I'll give you more time. I'll give you more time if you need more time. Why do I feel so lonely today? What I know for sure is that the corporations and the government will never get this right until you tell them that you expect it of them, and until you tell them often enough and loudly enough that they can't pretend that they don't hear you. Even when you feel like you don't have a voice, at least you can say amen when you know that you've heard the truth. Amen.
Thank you for watching our videos. We are entirely dependent on the donations of our listeners and members. We hope that you find this content to be important enough to help us to keep offering these videos to the public at no charge by becoming a regular contributor. Please click on the donate button on our website at www.spfccc.org. Thank you for your support of progressive religious programming.